Welcome to St. Philip the Deacon Lutheran Church. I know many of you are members that are here, so thank you for coming today. We're so delighted you joining us today and being part of our collaboration for mental health. And thank you for everyone who's online. I know there's thousands of you out there, so welcome. And we are welcoming you into the sanctuary at St. Philip the Deacon in Plymouth. I'm Susan Path, and I'm privileged to be the parish nurse here at St. Philip the Deacon with all these lovely people. We know here at St. Philip the Deacon that mental health, physical health, and spiritual health are all intertwined. And that's why we're here today. It's widely known that the children and families across the United States, including right here in Minnesota, are facing unprecedented mental health challenges. In December 2021, the U.S. Surgeon General's office issued an advisory on protecting youth mental health, calling attention to it as a national crisis. As the advisory states, far too many young people are struggling with their mental health and unable to get the support they need. We all have a role to play in supporting youth mental health and creating a world where young people can thrive. Families are struggling, not just youth mental health, but their families' mental health. Dr. Vivek Murthy advisory stated community organizations can educate the public about the importance of mental health, work to reduce negative stereotypes, biases, and stigmas around mental illness. These are our goals. We are also offering resources tonight to increase the resilience of individuals and families. So I hope you had fun gathering those today. Reverend Dr. Sarah Griffith Lund is here to strengthen us to meet our goals of advocacy for mental health in our community. Sarah was that kind of kid who the teachers called on to stay inside during recess to help students who needed extra time taking tests. No wonder she grew up to be a minister. Ever since college, she knew she wanted to dedicate her life to serving God and helping others. Sarah majored in religious studies at the college at Trinity University, graduated with a Master of Divinity degree at Princeton Theological Seminary, not a cemetery. That would be interesting. And also received a master's in social work degree at Rutgers University. She also received her doctorate at McCormick University, is that correct, in Chicago? And ministry and social work blend together her two passions of loving God and loving her neighbors, which is why we're here today. She was ordained into Christian ministry by the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, in 2002, and began serving a local church pastor as a local church pastor in 2003. She has served large and small congregations in Brooklyn, Minneapolis, and New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Sarah is an author. Her books are available after the presentation, again, in the narthex. She's a pastor, a community volunteer, an award winner, and today she's our speaker, spreading the message of hope for those with mental health issues, for their families, and for our communities. We welcome Sarah Lund.
Thank you so much to Susan and St. Philip the Deacon and to all of you who are here tonight. I also want to thank our resource fair providers. If you are out with the table, raise your hand if you brought resources to share. Please do stay afterwards and check out the wonderful resources. I know there's NAMI here and other groups. There's even a way for you to make your own mental health toolkit, so be sure to do that as well. Well, as we begin, I'm curious why you came tonight. And I'm wondering if there is a person in particular that's on your heart. It's okay if that person is you. If it's not you, is there someone else? When you think about mental health, is there a person that comes to your mind? if there's not a person that comes to your mind, let's take a moment just to ask God to connect us to a person in our life and to strengthen that connection, shining God's light of love upon them and upon us in that sacred connection. If I were to ask you how you are doing tonight, I'm curious what you would say. You know, like a mental health check-in. 10 would be the best mental health ever. 1 would be not so great, maybe the worst. 10 is the best ever, 1 is the worst ever. How is your mental health right now? I mean, it's hard to tell, because a lot of us do our jobs, go to school, do our thing, and no one might know how much we're really struggling. And there's not like a blood test for mental health or even a pulse. You know, there's no easy test. And so many of us don't really have a way to honestly check in with ourselves or with each other. But I would encourage you to think about doing a check-in with yourself every day about how is your mental health. And if you have people in your life, get used to doing that with each other and try to be honest about how you're really doing. So I'm curious, if I ask you that question again, how's your mental health right now? Is it a 10, best ever? Or is it a 6? Is it a 5? Or are you down at a 2 or a 1? Because I don't know about you, but it fluctuates day to day, right? How our mental health can be. I want you to know that I see you, all you ones out there. I see you. And if you're a 10 today, that's fine too. We're glad you're having a good mental health day. But a lot of us are in the low digits. And so I hope that this conversation tonight makes it okay for you to not be okay. So I'm a pastor, and I know that a lot of times in churches and in faith communities, we just are all good, and we wear our Sunday best, and we look good. But really, we might, just under the surface, have everything falling apart. And so I'm going to talk about that tonight. The messy part, the not pretty part, the imperfect part. Because I believe that's where God's love is calling us, into that messy, hard stuff. So I want to tell you a story about growing up in my family. I was born in Whittier, California, outside of Los Angeles. My mom and dad met in the 60s. My mom was finishing her training to be a teacher, and my dad was going into veterinary medical school. They fell in love in Missouri, and then as soon as he proposed to her, they were married within a few months. And my dad's dream was to go out to California and start a small animal emergency hospital. So back in the late 60s, that was kind of a new idea, an emergency hospital for small pets. So here my mom and dad go out to California, and my mom always wanted to have a big family. And so when they got married, they started dreaming about having kids. But after about 5 or so years, she couldn't get pregnant. Until she did. And then she had 5 kids within 6 years. And I'm number 5. But I wasn't supposed to be here, because after my brother, the 4th one, she and her doctor took care of some things. So I'm a surprise baby. So God, I guess there's something that I'm supposed to do. But another thing about my family is my dad was a successful animal doctor, and he was also a community leader on the school board. And he had a lot of great ideas. When my siblings were little, he made a go-kart out of a lawnmower engine. He was a pilot, and so he'd take them flying, and my brothers were in grade school. They got to fly the airplane. He bought them little motorcycles, and so bought my sister a pony. So life was good, and things were great, until they weren't. And it turned out my dad's behaviors were very manic, And he was very successful with the mania. And if you know what mania does, it's like supercharged energy, really brilliant, lots of creativity, and go, 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 go. But after a while, that mania kind of swooped down to the depressive. And so he would stay in bed for a long time. It's hard to work. And so his business and his animal practice kind of went down. My sister at age 6 would run the front desk at the animal hospital, so she was booking appointments for him, but he just wasn't able to do it. And back in the 70s and 80s, people weren't talking about mental health, but we saw this pattern. And my mom especially noticed it because the bank account, the money was not there to pay the mortgage. And so she faced this situation, mom with 5 young kids, and my dad's mental health is quickly deteriorating. She didn't know what to do. And so guess who is the first person she consulted about what was going on in our family? Who do you think she reached out to? The pastor, Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church in Whittier, California. She said to the pastor, this is going on, I'm worried. There's some erratic behaviors, some things that feel a little scary. And what do you think the pastor said to do? My mom with 5 little kids. Pray. He said, go to counseling. That's a good thing. Good thing to refer to counseling. He referred her to counseling, and she said to my dad, let's go to counseling. What do you think my dad said? He said no. But my mom still took the 5 kids. So I remember going to the therapist's office. It was very shadowy. It was very dark. I remember sitting there. I was terrified. And I remember the counselor asking us 5 kids what we thought my mom should do. And he said, raise your hand if you think you all should leave your dad. And that's when I remember my stomach twisting into a really bad knot. And I was really scared that the therapist didn't seem to know what to do. And how was I supposed to know? So that's, for me, when I think about my own mental health, it was physical. My anxiety and my anxiousness, I felt it in my stomach. Well, my mom ended up leaving my dad, but it was for a very tragic reason. His brain disorder kept evolving, and he was having paranoia. He was hearing voices. He began to believe that there was a force out to get him, and that it was manifesting itself in my oldest brother, Scott. And my brother Scott, this is Los Angeles in the early 80s. So skateboarding culture was a thing back then. So he had a bunch of skateboards, and my dad thought my brother was possessed by the devil, and that skateboarding was satanic. That was part of my dad's delusional thinking. And so they got into an altercation. My dad was trying to get rid of the satanic skateboards, and how do you think my brother felt about that? I also got in a big fight, and it was really scary. We were all at home after school, and tragically, my dad did take the skateboards, and he got in his truck to take the skateboards to the city dump. But my brother chased after my dad in the truck, hung on to the car door. My dad kept driving. My brother fell from the car, and my dad ran him over. My mom was still at work. And so my oldest sister called 911. They came out. My dad was gone. My brother got in the ambulance. Later, as I was thinking through what happened, and that was a real turning point, I asked my brother what he remembered. And he said, I remember being in the hospital, and Mom was there, and the police showed up. And the police looked to Mom and said, do you want to press charges? And what do you think my mom said? She said to my brother, what do you think we should do? And what do you think my brother said? He said no. So that's a moment I think back, what if? Because technically that was a hit and run. My brother was in the hospital, his leg was fractured. But what my mom did do was to get us away, because tragically, my dad was not aware that he had a problem. And it wasn't until much later I understood why. My dad's brain had a symptom called anosognosia. Anosognosia depends on how you pronounce it. But it's very common for bipolar and schizophrenia. It's a lack of self-insight. It's the brain's way of protecting itself. But what that means is a lot of folks who have that, they don't comply with treatment, they don't get therapy, they don't take meds, because to them, everything's fine. So I like to say it's like somebody who has a broken leg, and it's broken, and they're dragging it, and there's a trail of blood. And you say, oh my gosh, what's wrong with your leg? I need to call and get you help. Are you okay? Can I help you? And they just look at you like, I don't know what's wrong with you. Why do you say there's something wrong with me? There's something wrong with you. And that's how it was with my dad. And nobody could understand why. He wouldn't agree to get help. He wouldn't acknowledge there were any problems. His whole life, there was nothing wrong with him. There was something wrong with us. And to this day, that breaks my heart. But my mom did what she had to do to keep us safe. So I remember being in 3rd grade, and she said, as soon as the school year ends, you got to pack up everything. We're driving to Missouri. So I had my strawberry shortcake pillowcase, filled that with my stuff, and that's what I took with me. But it had to be a secret. My mom felt nobody could know, because then my dad would find out and we wouldn't be safe. So it was so hard at the end of the school year not being able to tell my friends I was moving away. We had hoped to move back once my dad got help. Once Dad got help. So we went to Missouri that hot summer. My sister just got her learner's permit, so guess who drove the Suburban from California to Missouri with all the windows rolled down. No AC, but she got us there safely. And that's kind of when things, we were living well, successful, upper middle class, really went downhill. We were on food stamps, welfare. We were homeless. My mom was looking at splitting up the 5 kids to live with different people. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And then my dad's delusions kept getting worse. So he figured out where we went. And so he was trying to track us down, kidnapped us at certain points during that time, and I was afraid of him. And so my mental health continued in my body throughout elementary school, being afraid of this person who was always trying to come get me. I was wetting the bed. I was, picking at my skin and my hands and just terrified. And I didn't know who to tell because nobody talked about these things. So I got really good at pretending that everything was fine. And we'd go to the thrift stores and find all the name brand clothes, the pink Guess jeans. And with food stamps, we'd buy name brand food. So nobody would know that I was poor, that my dad was now homeless, and that he was trying to kidnap me. And just got really good at hiding all that. And so we went to a church that was wonderful and very loving. I went to Sunday school and I learned about God's love. But looking back at that time in my life, nobody at church asked me if I was okay or what was going on. They didn't ask me where or how I needed God's love. So I kind of wonder, why not? Why didn't people at church talk about families like mine? Well, that brother Scott who got run over, he himself had a psychotic break. So when he was a senior in high school, he was suicidal, and I remember him having the suicidal attack, and my mom was terrified. So back then, she called 911, and the police came, and they tackled him to the ground and put handcuffs on him, and he went off in the squad car. This was about Christmas time. and our family went to church to Christmas Eve service. My brother was in the psychiatric hospital, and we didn't tell anyone, and nobody talked about it. Well, by this point, since nobody was talking about it, I guess I wouldn't either. So I just kind of went on with my life. About the same time, my dad's sister, who had adopted several kids, one of her kids was arrested, and this was a kid, my cousin Paul, who we visited on the farm. This was my dad's family. But my mom said, you better watch out for Paul. If he shows up here, don't let him in the house. He just got out of jail. And I said, okay. And then we heard on the news that he was arrested for murder. He, too, had lived with untreated mental illness. And in a psychotic episode, he murdered a woman in a neighboring farm community at the age of 20. So when I went off to college, my dad was living unhoused, hearing voices, delusional. My brother was in and out of psychiatric hospital. My cousin was on death row for murder. But I was fine. And I was great. So eventually, in my weird way of surviving and masking, I decided that one way for me to heal was to be part of the church that always told me how much I was loved. And so in college, I decided that I would be a pastor because I needed to be healed from this fear I had about my dad and this sense of hating him for what had happened to our family. I really blamed him, like he had some control over it. And so I had to have a heart-to-heart with God, and I really had a moment where I said to God, help me. I can't hold this pain anymore. Bring me your grace and your healing. And I was able to just leave that at the cross. And that really changed my life. And I wanted to be able to do that for other people as well, help bring that healing. So I went to seminary then to be this pastor and social work at Rutgers. And while I was at seminary, I was writing letters to my cousin on death row, Paul, because by the time he was on death row for 10 years, he had been involved with the chaplain and done Bible studies. And he had his own healing moment with God and started writing poems. That last semester in seminary, one of his letters told me he had an execution date. And he said, I really want you to come to my execution to be my chaplain. And I want you to watch my execution. And this was right before my seminary graduation. It was finals week. So I talked to the dean and I said, I know you don't know this about me, but my cousin's on death row and he wants me to come. What should I do? What do you think this dean of the students said? He said, go. That's holy ground. And I was so mad at him. I mean, I had to, what about finals? I guess I was training for the ministry, so go visit those in prison, okay. But nobody wants to go to death row. I mean, that's no man's land. But I went, and my sister and brother went. They're both medical doctors. So that little girl taking the phone calls at the animal hospital, she became a doctor. And the one brother that was flying airplanes, he became a doctor. That brother that got ran over, he became a professor of biochemistry. So our minds, you know, there's something to that. There's a lot of good stuff there. But I went to the execution, and it was really horrifying to see the machine. All the people who worked there, the nurse that helped my cousin Paul, he had a sinus infection, so they gave him all this medicine to get healthy. And then they said, here's some medicine for your nerves because he was in tears. He's like, you're anxious, take these meds, it'll help you feel better. And this was like 2 hours before the execution. They wanted to give him anti-anxiety medicine. My cousin wanted chocolate cake, and they did not have chocolate cake, but they had anxiety medicine. So I was the last person to be with him as his spiritual director. And as I was with him, his mental health deteriorated so much so that he was in a fetal position on the floor of the cage. They had him in a metal chain link cage. And he was curled up in a ball on the floor. And I said to Paul, Paul, you are a child of God. I love you, and God loves you. Then they took me to the viewing room, and I sat there on a plastic lawn chair that was bolted to the ground, and I looked through the window and watched him die on a gurney with IV. He was 30 years old. He was recovered from his sinus infection. He was perfectly healthy. And then he was dead. The guard came to get me, to escort me and our family to the parking lot, and I had brought my Bible with me. I was reading the Bible with Paul, and the guard said, "Ma'am, don't forget your Bible." And so I picked up my Bible and I said, "Don't forget Paul." But you know, we execute people all the time in this country, and almost all of them have mental illness. So I think about Paul. I went back to seminary, and they had held a candlelight vigil during the execution. And they sang the song, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" I came back, and the professors wanted me to share about the experience. And that was one of the first times that I testified about where does God show up in these horrific moments? Where was God that night Paul was executed? He was on the steps of the chapel, and later I realized God was with Paul and with the family of the victim. And in the news interview, the victim's family said, "Who cares about Paul? My sister's still dead." It did not bring the sister back to life just because they executed Paul. So they had no peace. There's no peace in executions. And so part of what I invite us to think about with mental health is, what is the role of faith? Where is God in these stories? And as people of faith, how can we be advocates for people in jail, prison, and death row who are living with untreated mental health? And how can God's grace show up there? Well, I went on to become an ordained minister. And, you know, my brother is in treatment for bipolar. He marries his high school sweetheart, but he's still up and down. He has alcoholism. He's in recovery. My dad, by this point, is homeless, living out of his truck. And my cousin was just executed. So I go before the ordaining board, and they look at all my credentials. I went to Princeton. They look at all my internships. And the last thing they said to me, they looked at my psych eval, all of that. They said, "Sarah, you have lived a charmed life." Yes, I have. And so that's the problem, right? This is just my story. We all have stories. Mine might feel a little extreme, but why is it that we feel like we have to present ourselves as perfect? You know? So when I was serving my first church, my dad died. I had seen him one last time at my wedding. I felt so guilty that I was getting married, and I hadn't talked to my dad in a long time, that I sent him a wedding invitation to the last address I had. And it turns out he got the invitation, and he put himself on a train. And he called my brothers the day before the wedding, and he said, "I'm at the train station, somebody get me." So my brother Steve got him at the train station. He was a mess. I mean, he'd been unhoused and unclean, and my brother took him to Penny's, got him a suit, got him shoes. So he came to the wedding, but we had to ask Cousin Kurt to be a bodyguard because we're all terrified. We're afraid of this man. But he was there. I didn't know he would come, and so I had asked my brother Scott to walk me down the aisle. But when my brother Scott, who had been run over by my dad, found out Dad was going to be there, he called me in tears. And he said, "Sarah, I can't. I'm afraid. What will Dad do if he sees me?" So then I'm this bride the day before the wedding. What am I going to do? Who's going to walk me down the aisle? I can't ask my dad. That didn't feel right. So I asked all three brothers. And so the favorite photo for my wedding day is me with one brother here and two brothers here. And we all are going down the aisle. But my dad was there in the back of the sanctuary, the last pew. And so we do the big family wedding photo, you know, the big one with all the people. And I'm smiling at the photographer, but right behind the photographer in that last pew is my dad. And we're in the big family photo. And he's back there. So by the time I'm a pastor, again, I'm this charmed life. My dad, 6 months after the wedding, he dies. He was in an indigent care facility, a nursing home for poor people. My brother, who's the doctor, had done everything he could to make sure Dad didn't die on the street. Because what had happened with his brain, it deteriorated so much, he wasn't taking care of anything of his health. His heart was so diseased, and he wasn't seeing a doctor or taking any meds. And when they saw him at the wedding, the doctor siblings, they were like, "Dad's not going to live much longer. It's amazing he's still alive." So he died 6 months after my wedding. I told my church, I said, "You know, my dad's died. I'm going to go do the funeral." And they were all shocked. Like, "You're 30. Your dad must be pretty young. How could he just die like that?" And they sent me beautiful Hallmark cards of a little girl in a pink frilly dress, a little hand in a big father's hand. And as I read those cards, something just boiled up inside of me. I got so angry. And I wondered, what is that anger about? And I was angry that the church didn't know the real story. And I was angry that I felt like I couldn't tell them. And that's when I started to realize that for me to be a pastor and really love my people, I've got to be more honest about who I am. And that for me to be loved by God, I've got to be more honest with God about all that I am. And so it was my dad's death that helped me to further reflect about where does God show up in mental health and in families where there's, generations of mental health. Because my dad had bipolar, my brother had bipolar, and we're seeing it in the younger generations of bipolar disorder, addiction, autism. It's all in my family. And one thing I realized is that our family survived in part by keeping secrets. That's how we thought we had to survive. But you know what happened to all those secrets? They were twisting in knots inside of my body. They were racing in my heart. They were making my brain throb with migraines. I became a physical manifestation of all these secrets. And I realized I couldn't continue that way. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my faith and my relationship with God. So right after my dad's funeral, I was at a retreat at the National Cathedral. We heard a preacher, Anna Carter Florence. She teaches at Columbia Theological Seminary. And she said, preaching is basically giving your testimony. Preaching is telling your God story. And she said, the church needs to hear your God story. Each one of you has a God story. What is yours? And that question, what is my God story? That's what opened up this whole space of the stories about mental health in my life and in our family and in the church. And it was a calling from God to break the silence and to tell those God stories so that we could find healing, authentic healing. And I realized that the church could have supported us so much more growing up. I wrote the book out of that call, Blessed Are the Crazy, Breaking the Silence About Mental Illness, Family, and Church. It talks about my dad, my brother, my cousin. And I was so scared to write this book. I thought I would be fired from my church. Nobody would ever want me to be their pastor ever again, because there's something clearly wrong with me, that this would be my story. But I felt God's conviction to do it. Do it scared anyways, just do it. And it turns out, from those of you who know about trauma and recovery, that there's some real good science now that says that through storytelling, you can find healing. And so for us as people of faith, I would encourage you to think about your life through that lens of how God has shown up throughout your life. When I think back about my dad, there are some moments where I really can see God at work. One of the times I saw my dad was meeting with him in public when I was still in seminary. We met at a Denny's, and I bought him breakfast. He said to me, "Let's have communion right now, right here. You're training to be a minister, aren't you? Serve me communion." And I was just like, that's so weird. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I just kind of blew it off. But looking back at that, I think he was trying to be supportive and really wanted me to share that sacrament with him. And so I see that as a God moment in my dad. And realizing that his brain was blocking his self-insight, I look back with so much more compassion on his life and his story. He did not intend to harm us the way he did. He did not have the ability to be in relationship the way that I needed him to be, and I have forgiven him for that. And so seeing him through the eyes of God with compassion has brought me so much healing, even though he's been dead now for 18 years. So this idea of storytelling, I think there's something to it. And I'm encouraging you to become more comfortable telling your stories. That mental health check-in, where are you, from a 1 to a 10, get more comfortable with being honest with yourself and others. How is it really going? I wanted to share with you that my story continues on, and I continue to find healing through writing books. And I realized that I married somebody who has a whole long history of mental illness in his family. Of course I did. We're still married. We'll be married for 19 years this fall. But one way we have continued to stay married is to prioritize our mental health for each other and for our child. Because, when we were dating, I wasn't telling him about my executed cousin, my dad who was unhoused, my brother in the psych ward. That's not cute. So we dated, and I didn't know about his dad's alcoholism or his sister's drug addiction or his own depression. That's not sexy. So it wasn't until we were married where all of these things came to light, and we realized that we could be in recovery. We could support each other's recovery. So I wrote Blessed Union is really that love, that really hard love story, because even as a trained pastor, nobody taught me in premarital counseling to discuss with couples the mental health history of each other's families. That's so important, but it doesn't come up a lot. So this is a resource to help people who are thinking about getting married really honestly, in sickness and in health. That includes mental health sickness, but we don't think about it. My mom said she never wanted to divorce my dad. She never wanted to, but for her safety and our safety, it was the right thing to do. So it's hard when it's a partnership, and it's hard to know whether to stay or not, right? Because you have to make that choice. So this is a resource for that. In my family, I talked about the bipolar disorder and anxiety and depression. Also, suicidality runs in my family. We see it in different generations. My dad was suicidal at one point. I had to call 911 to do a well visit on him. He didn't like that, but I did it. And my brother Scott, who has bipolar disorder, he thinks about suicide every day. And when he's really honest with me, he says he thinks about it 7 times an hour, every hour he's awake. So part of his treatment and recovery is, how does he live with that? How does he stay safe? My brother Steve, who is a medical doctor, he married a doctor, and they have beautiful children together. In a family like mine, we're always checking in on, how's so-and-so and how's so-and-so. There's certain kids you're more concerned about than others. That's a mistake, okay? Some people are better at hiding things than others. And so we were shocked to learn that my niece Sydney died by suicide because she was, the healthy one who was going to graduate early from high school. 6 AP honors classes. Brilliant, beautiful, talented, the favorite. And now she's gone. She sent a text the morning she died to her mom that says, "Mom, I want to go back into therapy." So my hope is that we would take care of our brains like we do our teeth. Because we go to the dentist every 6 months to get a checkup. They x-ray our teeth, they do a deep clean. Why don't we do that with our brains? Especially for little kids, the first teeth cleaning, it's a big deal. You start them young, every 6 months. We need to do that with our kids, with their mental health. Get them a mental health checkup every 6 months. It shouldn't take a suicidal teen texting the day of their suicide, "I need a therapist." Every child deserves a therapist. Don't wait until it's too late. And so Blessed Youth is dedicated to Sydney, and it's really about prevention and having these conversations with our families, with grandchildren, so that every family knows how to talk to their kids about mental health. Out of this comes a survival guide. So this is for kids, and it's a mental health 101. It's a mental health toolkit. And I thought about some churches are really concerned about their kids and keeping pure until marriage. And sometimes they talk to their kids about promising purity until marriage. Have you ever heard of this? There's like a promise ring. It's a big deal for some churches. And I thought, okay, that's okay. What about promising about saving their life? What if we talk to our kids about how to stay alive and provide tools for them to have a safety plan? And so that's where this book came about. There is a safety plan that each child can create, thinking about trusted adults. And if they're having any thoughts of self-harm, they're going to talk to a trusted adult. And so they promise to do that. And this has been a life-saving resource. My niece Sydney, as I said, was brilliant, and my dad was brilliant. My brother, who has bipolar, brilliant. And as I get more into my study about mental health and learning about me, and I told you earlier about my physical manifestations of mental health, I just got diagnosed in later adulthood as having complex PTSD. So that charmed life that looks so pretty in the pictures, I've got a whole lot going on, and I'm in recovery with a therapist. But as I learn more about mental health, I'm excited that the conversation is expanding to think about brain differences and the unique ways our brains show up and how we can all get support for our differences. It might be therapy, it might be medication, but it might be other ways we can make space for people. So that's where neurodiversity comes into play. I was talking at Princeton Seminary about mental health and faith as a lecturer, and the professor told me, you know, a lot of my students are coming to seminary right out of college, and they say that they're neurodivergent. And I said, they're neuro what? He said, yeah, these students, they have autism, they have ADHD, they want to be pastors, ministers, and they're neurodivergent. And I said, okay, I don't know that the church is ready for that. But you know what? Pastors have been neurodivergent this whole time, right? We just now have words for it. So it's really exciting in my own journey of faith, thinking about my family, thinking about my dad, to not only see the shadow parts of how his brain works, but also the really beautiful parts. And for my niece, I wish I could go back in time when we were driving in the car and she said from the back seat, yeah, I have ADHD and I take meds because it helps me do better in school, but you know, it makes it hard to have friends. She was telling me something really important that I just kind of glossed over. With the neurodiversity conversation, it allows us to say, okay, you may need meds, but what else do you need so that you can flourish? We want to celebrate your different mind. It's not bad, it's just different, and that's okay. Let's figure out what you need. And the church can be a beautiful place for all people, no matter how old you are, to really say your brain is different and good, that you are made in God's image, there's nothing wrong with you, and we're gonna love you and provide all the support that you need. So Blessed Minds has lots of stories about that and lots of examples. So you can tell I'm on this journey. And even tonight, a really lovely person said, you know, I heard you were coming to speak and I saw your picture on your book, and she said, you know, you just look so pretty. And how could all these things have happened to you and all these things be true about you and you still look that way? Because that's actually not that great. And what would it look like for us to look how we feel instead of covering up how we feel? And the neurodiversity conversation makes space for that. And I'm neurodivergent with my complex PTSD. And so it allows me to just say to people, I'm neurodivergent, my brain's a little different, and so sometimes these bright lights give me migraines. Sometimes I need to fidget. And you can have fidget prayer beads or bracelets, and this just helps me stay present and focused. It reminds my body that I'm safe. Nobody's gonna hurt me, that it's okay to be here and to share with you all. So thank you for coming tonight. We have lots of great resources. These books are resources, but also at the tables, there's beautiful people here to help you. And I think the takeaway I hope you all have is that we know from brain science that mental health is a family affair. If it's impacting one person, it impacts the whole family. And a lot of brain differences run in the family. They're biological, genetic. Don't listen to some of the voices in the news right now, especially around autism. Some of that language is really harmful. Talking about people being diseased that need to be eradicated. The neurodiversity paradigm is a much healthier model that doesn't judge or blame people for having a brain difference, but makes sure there's space for them inside community. So I believe, Susan, we have some time for questions. And I try to be an open book, and so I really encourage you to feel free to ask questions about something I've said or something that you want to know about. There might be someone else here who knows the answer, since we have so many great people tabling.
I'll let Sarah just step aside for a second and get a drink of water before she answers questions, and I will just say a few things. Lori tonight brought up to me that she'd seen a sticker that said neuro-spicy instead of neurodivergent, which I thought was really cool and kind of fun. I want to thank you, Sarah, for those inspiring stories and thoughts to help our community move forward, better prepare for hope and light and healing of our families by telling our stories. Look for St. Philip to do more on telling stories to help healing. Our pastors already this fall told their stories. We've done a storytelling Restore series back in 2021 with Kevin Kling, who's an awesome storyteller in the Twin Cities. Go back and look at that and look at how you can heal from telling your stories. So thank you for being so vulnerable and caring and sharing your story with us so that we can better understand what we need to do to move forward, and that people have light in them of God, and we need to find their light and let their light shine through our light. I'll let Sarah rest a little bit, and I want to thank all the multitudes of volunteers that helped us get ready for the toolkit experience out there. Go ahead afterwards, they'll be open for like a half hour afterwards, and Sarah will continue to sign her books. Our prayer shawl ministry knit those beautiful little red hearts, so I thank them. They went all out. I think they did over 150 of those little hearts, and they have to do 2 sides, so that's 300 of those cute little hearts. And our new sewing guild with Faye, Nancy, and Terry, who made this stunning array of fabric heart pockets for aromatherapy, so I want to thank them. And the aromatherapy tube stuffers, Michelle, Lori, Terry, and Lori. And all the volunteers that helped out there with the toolkit resource fair you saw tonight. Thank you. You're all beautiful people, and everybody was having so much fun. And St. Philip the Deacon staff, especially Kate, who did the awesome toolkit cards, and Pastor Valerie, who helped me. Our sound with Paul and Steve, and video. Let's give them all a hand for all their help. And I'd like to thank mHealth for the grant that I received to help do this program. So that was very helpful, and also they believe that body, mind, and spirit are all intertwined. So thank you. And I'll take questions now. We have 2 microphones that are on the sides if you have any questions to ask Sarah. Otherwise, I can run around with the microphone. So does anybody have any questions to walk up to the microphone? Are you afraid? I will come and get you so you won't come on camera if you want to raise your hand.
Some of the work that I love doing is the work of theology. So there's storytelling, telling God's story, but then what is the collective story we tell about mental health and God? And for a long time, the church had really bad, toxic theology that talked about mental illness as demon possession caused by sin or a curse from God. So part of the work of people of faith is to update our theology. Now that we know more about the brain and neuroscience, we can help people understand that prayer is good, but also medications. You can love your therapist in Jesus. It's not just something you pray away or have more faith and you'll be healed. And we laugh about it, but there's still some of that in the water we drink. And so the more you can just share that destigmatizing message that you can be a Christian and still depressed. Like Jesus' love doesn't cure depression, right? And so that's where some of the stigma is, especially for clergy. So tomorrow we're going to meet with clergy, which I'm so excited about. But there's still that stigma and shame, and some of it comes from the harmful views of the church, equating mental illness with disease. So we all got some work to do around that.
I do have a question. Do you feel like it's gotten better, that people are now being less stigmatized by mental health, or?
It's gotten better, like generationally. You can see younger people being much more open about it. But my niece who died by suicide at age 16, she still felt there was a lot of stigma. And she wanted to bring in mental health into the schools. And hopefully teaching in the high schools would help destigmatize. So stigma is still with us. And so all of us can help destigmatize it just by talking about it more and be more honest about what we're going through and struggling with.
One of the issues I always see is resources and finding the proper resources. And I was just curious, what resources have you developed and utilized in your church or would like to, to further, to help the kids immediately? It always seems like when you're in that mental health crisis, you need that soft landing immediately. Excuse me. And in the issues I've faced in the past, it just never seems to be there. So I'm just curious, what you have or what you could suggest, some things that we can develop to help with that.
Thank you. It's a great question. Some of the work that I've done is to create that resource for the church. I'm part of the United Church of Christ, and we have a nonprofit called the Mental Health Network. And we created a curriculum for churches to be a wise church for mental health. Wise, welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaged. So there's all of these resources a church can do to be a mental health wise church. And one of them is a spiritual support group. And this was started by a guy whose brother had died by suicide. His son had bipolar, was in and out of the hospital, and he wished there was more support in church to talk about it. So he said, I wonder if the minister would support this idea of having a support group, just to share these things in church. His wife was the minister. So she said, of course, let's do it. So he created this model of a spiritual support group where you can check in and share what's going on in a faith setting. They'll pray with you, but they're also going to hold in confidentiality. And so they met. And so my church has a spiritual support group for mental health. I also view all ministry as mental health ministry, because anytime you're connecting and talking to someone, you can build up their resilience. You can make that human connection, let them know they're being cared for. But in youth group, we intentionally do a mental health check-in every time we meet for youth group. We do a high, a low, and a disco. And we say every time we start that we want to be a safe place for you to talk about your mental health. I'm also part of the National 988 programming. So like 911, there's a 988. You can text or call, and that's a hotline that has confidential support. And so that's a tool that all of us can use as well. But I think what you said is that soft landing space. Lisa Miller wrote the book Awakened Brain, and she talks about how we are spiritually wired. There's a spiritual docking station in our brain, and that we need a place to connect beyond ourselves. And that people who have that connection, it builds up their protective factors. And so whether it's God or another human being, we are wired to be connected. And so churches and faith communities, we can be that soft landing space. And so I'm curious, do you all have a safe person that you can talk to when you're having a bad day? Who's your soft landing space? Because we all need one.
Hi. This is sort of actually a response to that question also, because Sarah, thank you for your response. And I also just wanted to put in a plug for Mental Health Connect, which is an organization that St. Philip the Deacon is part of. We're a collaborative of 42 congregations in the area working on stigma reduction, but we also have a mental health navigator, or navigation line. You can get a card in the back about that. But if you or someone you love at any point is looking for any sort of resources for mental health, you can call or email the navigators, and they will help walk people through the process of finding a good fit. So wanted to share that.
We always kind of wonder what more could we do. The stigma is still there. They used to say, we need more mental health therapists. Yes. We need better insurance. Yes. But that stigma is still something we've got to peel away. And we have self-stigma. We don't want to see it in ourselves. So I'll stand here and tell you, our family has 5 mental health therapists. My husband has one, I have one. We have a marriage therapist. My son has a play therapist and a talk therapist. Because we need all of that. And there's no shame in that, okay? So however it is that you can take care of your mental health, this is your sign from God. Go do it. Get that therapy appointment booked. Do what nurtures your soul. Call, text that friend. You go to that 12-step meeting, whatever you need. I'm 5 years sober. I had my last drink when I realized that I was dealing with stress and my depression through alcohol. And that wasn't good for me. And so without alcohol, I've reached more healing in my journey. So I'm really grateful for that. So you never know, that might be something that would help you as well. Well, I have a closing blessing, if it's time for that. Okay. This is a benediction I'd love to bless you all with. It's called Things to Remember. You are amazing, you are beautiful, you are complex in a good way, you are a beloved human being, your brain is different and good. The fact that you exist is a miracle and a dream come true. You are here for a reason. You may not know your reason yet, but trust me, it's a really good one. Your life is important. Getting better takes time. Be patient and gentle with yourself. You are more than your disability, neurodiversity, diagnosis, or mental health experiences. It's okay to be different. It's okay to not be okay for a while, even if it's hard. Your life matters to God. Try your best. Breathe. Stay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you, Sarah, for sharing your vulnerable story, and for all of you listening so intently. We really appreciate that. I want to thank Mental Health Connect also for being a partner with us. Sarah will be talking tomorrow at Bethlehem Lutheran Church to a clergy group, and then there is an open group with a lunch, but I think the lunch was already done. I don't know if they can show up if they haven't paid for lunch, but anyway, you can talk to Hannah about that. But they're talking about neurodiversity, and we'll be looking at her latest book, Sarah's latest book on spicy neuro or neurodiversity. And so to all of you, thank you for coming. Go out and enjoy a little bit more of the toolkit out there, and make your own toolkit to stay safe, to stay well, and go in peace. Shine your light to help others shine their light also. Amen.